God, I thank you for these young leaders that you're raising up. It's a very unique time to follow you, to love you, to represent you in our culture, God. I pray for each young person here who's pursuing your call in their life, who's trying to see what is it that you want to do with their life. God, I pray that you give clarity, even in the next couple of weeks, give favor. Would you give even a passion and a hunger to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, to also find friends that drive them closer to you, to pursue excellence, and to be set apart in many ways, God. We need the leaders in this room. We need the next generation to hunger for you, to have favor from you, to represent you boldly in ways that we haven't seen. I'm excited about the future of the church. I'm excited for the leaders that are here, and I pray that you would use this time to help in a practical way. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I know I'm just like, hey, who's this young guy? I've never seen him before. I don't know who usually speaks at chapel, but I assume I look different. And so I am also somewhat, like I said, I'm from Dallas. I'm somewhat racially ambiguous. Some people are like, is this guy Greek? Is he Egyptian? But I'm actually half Mexican. I don't know if there's any Mexican people here. But, all right, the Mexicans sit in that section right there. I'm half Mexican, but I'll be honest with you guys. I'm more of a Mexicant. I can't speak much Spanish. And so all I know how to really say, I worked at Papados one time, and that was when all the cooks were trying to talk to me in Spanish. And I got them to teach me how to say this. Yo soy mexicano, pero mi madre no enseñó español. And so for everyone else who doesn't speak Spanish, what I've been told is what this says is, my mom's Mexican, but she never taught me Spanish. My mom's the youngest of 14 in this huge Mexican family that actually lives in Wichita, Kansas, of all places. And then my dad is actually, this is me growing up, my dad is actually, I don't think the slides are coming up yet. My dad is African-American, actually. And this is me in high school in Dallas, Texas. I love basketball. And you guys might be thinking, man, this is a light-skinned African-American guy. And I just want to clarify. So my dad's a 6'4" tall African-American man from South Africa, but he's white. If you know, there's a lot of white people in South Africa. But I always say he's technically African-American because he's born in Africa. And so I'm whatever is convenient whenever I was growing up. I'm just like half Mexican, half African-American. I'm on this basketball team, if you guys can pull that up again. And I loved basketball, and probably like you guys in high school, you kind of find your identity. For me, it was basketball, and then this girl I was dating for 3 years. Did anyone date a person in high school for longer than a year and a half? Anyone here? Anyone date longer than 2 years? All right, someone back there. Anyone for 3 years? Okay. Well, did you go 4 years? No, all right, I guess, all right. Either they're married or it ended, I'm assuming. Okay, so when you're together for 3 years, this girl knows, when you're together for 3 years in high school, everyone starts to think, man, these guys are going to be high school sweethearts. These guys are getting married. And for me, it was my whole identity, and I didn't use these words back then, but my identity was in basketball, and my identity was in this girl I was dating. She was the captain of the hip-hop team. I was the basketball guy. I felt like it was this ghetto High School Musical in the making. And 3 years together, I was like, we'll go to college, we'll get married. But then one Monday, after this long tournament, we had been out this whole weekend, my girlfriend has something going wrong. And I don't know if you're a date a girl, but for whatever reason, girls, whenever something's going wrong, it's like you guys act like nothing's going wrong. You act like it's fine. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? I can tell something's wrong. She's like, no, it's fine. Just let's talk about it later. Girls, stop doing that to us guys. Like, we don't want to talk about it later. We can't, you leave it in our imagination, so many things that could be wrong, and we assume the worst. So I'm like, no, there's no way, something's wrong. What is happening? What happened? What happened? And she's like, okay, I'll tell you. I was like, what happened? She starts tearing up. She's like, Grant, I cheated on you. I was 17 years old. I was in high school. And after 3 years, this girl lets me know that this whole weekend she's been hanging out with this guy at work, and she slept with this other guy. And it crushed me. It crushed me. I don't know if you've ever been, again, in a relationship where you probably think about the person you've been the most vulnerable with. You ever been very vulnerable? You're like, man, this is my safe place. And then that person betrays you. It just broke me. But because I knew my friends would make fun of me, I knew my school would just be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she cheated on you, man, what the heck? I just didn't want that attention. I said, don't tell anyone. Let's break up, we're done, but don't tell anyone. That won't embarrass you, but it also won't embarrass me. And so for a couple days, I'm just thinking about this in my mind of like, what happened, what's going on? I go to practice on Wednesday at basketball. I get into a fight actually with one of the players. I'm not at my best this week. And my coach kicks me off the basketball team. So these two things that all I knew, even if you thought, like, who is Grant? I was be like a basketball player. Oh, yeah, he dates that girl, right? Now I'm like, what do I do with my time? If I wasn't playing basketball, I was with her. If I wasn't with her, I was playing basketball. All my best friends were on the team. And now I'm thinking, man, I don't even know who I am. So I go to church actually a month later. It was the very first time I ever went to church. And I hear someone come up. And by the way, I only went to this church. My mom, I don't know if you guys have moms like this. My mom was always trying to get me to be a Christian. Like, she's always playing Christian music, which I'll be honest, I didn't really like Christian music. I don't know if y'all heard the songs like, I was thinking the other day, what if cartoons got saved? If you ever heard this song, I was like, man, this song is not, if I'm listening to this in front of my friends, they'll make fun of me. And I just felt like, my mom would always squeeze and try to get us boys to be a Christian, and we just didn't want to do it. My dad's not a believer, and I finally go to this church, and the reason was I was single for the first time in a long time, and I go to this church, I sit in the very back row, it was the youth ministry on a Wednesday night, and I hear someone preaching the gospel, but especially I hear a guy come up, he tell his testimony about how he did really, really well at football. He was in Texas, and he talked about how his identity started getting wrapped in football. I had never heard this idea of where are you placing your identity and what you revolve your life around and your value around. And basically he said, whenever I pursued football and I did well, it seemed like girls liked me more. It seemed like when I did well, my friends in my school made me more popular. But he said especially it just seemed like my dad connected with me more whenever I did well at football. And he said, I just kept going down this road of like, in order to do well, then I need to be a great football player. And he actually did really well that they won the state championship. And I don't know if y'all know what that's like here in Oklahoma, but wearing the state championship in Texas is a big deal. This Friday Night Lights, if you're familiar with it, and he gets I'm joking. I don't even care about Texas football or Oklahoma football, so no dissing. And so he gets the state championship, and he thinks this will be the most climactic day of my life when I get this championship. And at the end of the day, he said when he held that trophy, and I'm listening at 17 years old in the back, and he says, when I held that trophy, I was shocked to feel how empty it was. And it kind of hit me. I felt like for the first time, I felt like, man, I'm pursuing my identity in something other than God, and I feel empty when I lost it. He gained it, and he's pursuing his identity in something other than God, and he gained it, and he feels empty when he gets it. There got to be something more. And so they play this song by Switchfoot. It was like, this is your life. Is this who you want to be? I don't know if you know this song, but they kept playing it, and I'm just crying, thinking, man, tearing up for the first time ever. Like, I guess God's speaking to me. And I go to the front, give my life to Christ. That was March 8, 2006. Why that's important is, for many of you guys, the biggest day of your life is the day you gave your life to Christ. For me, it totally was. But two big things happened within 2 weeks of that. Because I went home and I'm like, I'm not telling anyone I became a Christian. Like, I knew my mom is going to post about it on Facebook as soon as I tell her. She's going to be so happy. And I didn't expect to become a Christian that day. March 8, 2006, I give my life to Christ, and I'm like, I'm just going to wait 2 weeks and see what happens. Because I've seen kids go and have emotional experiences, and then they come back, and within 2 weeks, they're back to what they used to do. I want to see if this is real. And so I don't really tell anyone. And 2 weeks later, I get a call from an older pastor at the church who was running the youth ministry, and he basically says, hey, I see the school that you go to. I saw that you filled out a card that you gave your life to Christ. Can you tell me your story? And he asked me a couple questions. He's like, hey, are your parents believers? I said, my mom is, my dad's not. Do you have Christian community or friends at your school? I'm like, no. He asked, like, well, so what's your story? And I tell him, man, I did not think I was going to become a believer. I was there for girls. But I had experience, and I knew I'd be lying to myself if I didn't feel like God was speaking to me. And he just basically said this. He said, look, I've been trying to reach your school for a while. Your school is pretty rough. Not a lot of young people I've ever met there go to church. But if you're willing, man, he said, I'd love to pour into you, and I'd love to disciple you, and I'd love to mentor you if you would be a missionary to your school. And he said, but you got to take this thing seriously. And I just felt like God was like, either you're going to make Christianity and church a hobby where you're like, go to church, it's this hobby people know you have, but you actually live a different life. And I just think that's torture when your heart, one foot of your heart is in the world and one foot of your heart is in the faith. It's terrible. Like, it's torture. Or I'm just going to go all in. And for me, I was like, I don't like to be halfway. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in. So I said yes. And here's what's interesting is whenever you give your life to Christ, you have this vertical relationship with God now. But then I also had this vertical relationship with this mentor. Kevin was his name, who was going to disciple me. And then I had this horizontal mission field where he's like, you are the light that your school's going to see. And it was such a game changer for me to have this. And so I said, well, that's one thing that was different. Because how many of you guys gave your life to Christ before you were 18 years old? Just raise a hand. Keep them high. How many of you guys got discipled quickly after your salvation? Not many compared to how many give your life to Christ. Because what happens is we get saved when we're young, but we don't get discipled when we're young. How many of you would say, I've never had someone older in the faith make a commitment to pour into me and to invest in me? How many of you guys would say you've never had someone like that? Statistically, about 85% of people have not. So I get this discipler in my life, but something else that's pretty funny. So you guys saw this picture right here. Sorry. If you guys can pull up that picture. So this was my community in high school. I go from these being my closest friends to the church I got saved at wasn't looking like this. The church I got saved at was a lot of white people that were really, really happy and preppy. And it was like culture shock to go from my friends at high school to my friends at church. It was just like a whole different neighborhood. Like, they weren't even white. They were like pink people. And y'all, I don't know if y'all know this. Again, this might be just more of the South and Texas or Dallas culture, but all of a sudden, I started wearing American Eagle. I started wearing like Hollister. I started wearing Aeropostale, these brands that were popular at that time. I started wearing tighter clothes. I started changing a lot. And also, I started even eating at different places. You know, I had never been to these three places. I bet many of you guys, even the last 24 hours, have been to one of these three places. I had never been to these three places until I got saved and hung out with white Christians. I call it the second Christian Trinity. I had never been to Chick-fil-A ever until I became a Christian. I had never been to Chipotle, and I had never been to Starbucks. But when I became a Christian, that's like all we did, and we always went there. They were just obsessed with these places. In fact, I never tried coffee because I'm like, look, I'm changing so much. I have never tried coffee in my entire life. Because I saw all the people, including probably you guys, that were like just addicted to it. And I'm like, man, I'm already changing so much. I can't do this. And so I get this culture shock of getting in a new world, in this new Christian life, and then I have this mentor and this discipler. And what I want to share with you guys is what I found is many of you guys are going to be looking to pursue something to do for God in some type of industry, in some type of work. And college will prepare you for that, but also there's a way to get prepared through discipleship and through mentorship. And by and large, like I said, most young people are not getting mentor discipled. So what I want to try to help do is, how can you find someone who would mentor you, who would disciple you, and what are they looking for? And so here's one of the problems is, I think that in the church, we don't have this next gen problem. We have a discipleship problem. Right now, a lot of people are wondering what is going to happen with your generation. Like, what are you guys going to do? They'll be like, you guys are, whether it's dropping out of college or leaving the church or not getting married or lazy or not, whatever. You guys hear all this junk, right? Yes? Is Nazarene like kind of like Catholic? Is it like really quiet? Maybe? All right. I'm playing. I don't know much about Nazarene, but I want to share what can you guys do. And so here's what I'd say is, before we talk about mentorship and discipleship, I want to break down the differences. To me, mentorship is meeting regularly with someone older in the faith. Mentorship is imagine Jesus going to Peter. He didn't just mentor someone, he discipled them. Both are good, but one is better. And mentorship is if Jesus went to Peter and said, hey, come and meet with me. Let's go to Starbucks once a week and I'll pour into you for 3 years. But that's what mentorship is. But discipleship is a little bit different. Discipleship isn't come and meet with me. Discipleship is come and follow me. And so instead of, if you guys again can just keep it up a little bit longer. Sorry, trying to pull this up. Come and follow me. So like I said, come and meet with me is if you were to just meet one-on-one with someone. While discipleship is come and follow me, that's actually like joining the world. That's going to include yourself in their life. Like, for example, these are the areas I would encourage you to think about joining someone older life is. And here's what I would say is finding someone who's spiritually a couple steps ahead of you in the life that you want to live. Like they're doing what you want to do, or they have the character that you want to grow in. So it's like, is there someone that's a believer that's in the faith that is, maybe if it's you want to be an architect, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to start a nonprofit, you want to be a speaker, you want to be an author. Is there someone in your church that this school is connected to, that you know among friends that is doing this, and how do you get them to let you join their life? Because most of the time, a lot of the times when I've found young people to ask other older people to disciple them or to mentor them, they get nervous to do that. They get afraid to do that. In fact, after that guy discipled me, 2 years later, he moved, and I started asking other guys, hey, will you disciple me? And they actually said no. And I realized, has anyone ever asked someone to disciple them or mentor them, and they said no, or you felt like rejected because they said no? Has anyone ever asked someone to disciple them? Yeah? Can I ask, how did it go? Did they say yes or no? Yes. Who were they? Why did you ask her to disciple you? Okay. She said she asked him because she's the most godly woman you know. I'm going to switch actually a little bit. I think that this is important for us to see why. Here's the most real thing I'm going to say to you guys as young people, because when you're young, you actually could do something where you just hang out with young people, and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to spend a lot of time hanging out with older people, or I don't even know that much older people. If you guys, like you are in college and you are single, there's this time of your life. I would just say this is the most important, one of the most important times of your life. And the enemy or the world will say, hey, just experience college, figure out what you want to do with your life, just hang out and just this is the time to have fun. Even if you watch movies about college, it's not usually about getting discipled or getting mentored. It's not usually about giving your life to something for Christ. It's usually about hanging out. It's about having fun. And as Christians, I'm not even saying drinking and drugs and sex. I'm saying as Christians in Christian colleges, what I've noticed is we'll just spend a lot of time having fun, hanging out, discovering what our passions are, but we mostly just hang out with young people. And if you just hang out with young people, that's like a book. Did you guys ever have to read Lord of the Flies? In the book Lord of the Flies, it's a whole bunch of young people that get stuck on an island and they make their own rules, and that's what young people hanging out with other young people is like. It's like seventh graders asking other seventh graders for dating advice. Like that. How many of you guys ever got like so much advice from someone who's like always single or always breaking up? You're like, dude, you don't know anything about dating. Like, how are you going to give me advice about relationships when you met the last girl off like Hinge? Like, I'm good, actually. What I would tell you, if you want to be married one day, I would ask someone who's married for advice. I would not be asking young singles. If you want to have a solid job in a certain area, I would ask other solid guys that have, or girls that have jobs in that area. I can't tell you how many times I meet young people that are like, hey, I'm looking for a job in this area. And I'll ask, well, who are your friends? And I'm like, well, do they have jobs? Oh, no, they're looking for jobs too. Dude, like, do you guys get it? Like, I'm just, here, let me give you a visual. How many of you guys are single? Just please participate. I need, how many of you are single? Single. I mean not married. All I mean is not married. Okay, so a lot of you guys, most of you guys are not married. If you want to get married, there's people that are single around here. Just look who's raising their hand. But I'm serious. Like, again, the most real thing, if you're like, man, I didn't get this guy or all this, but there's one thing he said that I'm like, that's kind of sounds true. The world is going to tell you that this season of your life is the season you, again, can just hang out, explore, have fun, and then when you get married, then you grow up, and then you should pursue all the serious things in life, and then you should mature. I'm telling you all, that is a lie. What you do right now sets up the trajectory for the rest of your life. And what you do right now, you will never have this time back again. For example, this time, if you guys could pull up that slide, please, there's this time right now, you guys are in it, you just started it, where you do not have to ask your parents for permission anymore. This window of, ideally, you have a car, you have a little bit of money, you don't have to ask your parents for permission, you can just go and do things, right? And you don't yet have to ask your wife for permission. You can just go. Like, when you get married, I know a lot of y'all are like, no, I want to get married. You're like, I just got married 10 months ago. Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. I don't have any pictures. So I just got married, and they call marriage golden handcuffs. Do you guys get what I mean? Is like, they're golden, but they are handcuffs. They're good, but there are responsibilities. Like, once you get married, especially once you have kids, you can't just go and do things. Like tonight, some of your friends will say, you could say, hey, let's go to Starbucks, or let's go to Chipotle, or, let's hit them all three. Let's go to Chick-fil-A. They might say, let's do that. You can just go. Like, you can just say, yeah, sure, let's do it. If I have some friends say, hey, tonight, can you come do this? I'm like, yeah. Let me check with my wife real quick, man. Hey, bro, we're going to go watch the game. Okay, yeah, let me ask. Or even, man, if I'm going to spend money, it's like all of a sudden you got joint accounts. Or if you have kids, it's like, I need to get a babysitter. Have you ever noticed when your friends get married, they just basically disappear? And also, if they have a baby, they're gonna, you might as well unfollow them on Instagram. Like, that just became their baby's Instagram, because that's all the pictures you're going to see. And so, again, it's golden handcuffs. But my point is, so often what happens is young people get married, they have kids, and like, now I'm going to start maturing, I'm going to be serious, I'm going to focus, I'm going to build this. I have never met a married person with a full-time job who has kids. Ask them. I dare you, just one thing to do, practically. Ask anyone you know who's married, who has kids, and has a full-time job. That's not even like, there's a lot of people in the world like that. If they have married, full-time job, have kids, ask them, how much free time do you have? What is that? Was that someone who's married with a full-time job and free? I'm telling y'all, how much free time do y'all got? Y'all might feel like, oh, I don't have that much. You will never have as much free time as you have in this season of your life, ever. Is that scary? I'm telling you, what are you going to do with that time? What are you going to do with that time? Because it might feel like, again, well, everybody else I know, when I look to my right, I see a lot of other young people that are just hanging out and not pursuing this, and they're not hanging out with older people. And I see a lot of other people that are to my left, they're not hanging out with older people, or they're not seeking discipleship, they're not seeking mentorship. You're right. But there's a lot of young people that graduate college and they don't find a job remotely close to what they majored in. The grand majority of young people I'm seeing, they're just using college as an experience. It's not even to train them for their work. It's not even to pursue their career and their calling. It's just this experience to find out, who am I, what am I passionate about, and what can happen. And I'm telling you, what seems to be happening to the majority of a lot of young people is you could just be in debt and not have a job where you were passionate about. But by the time you get to that point, you got to start being serious and just take whatever job you can get. Or you could use this time as wise as you can. There's these verses in the Bible. It says, if you guys can pull this up, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. There's another time when time comes up in the Bible. This is David. He says, so teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I'm just telling you, I think if you could say, how do I find older leaders and how do I put my time and funnel it through their wisdom? Because you have time what they don't have is time, but what they do have is wisdom. Even through experience, if you could funnel your time, and instead of learning from your mistakes, I always say, I don't want to learn from my mistakes. I want to learn from old people's mistakes. I want to talk to them that have already gone before me and say, how can I not go through the pain and hit the wall and then save time, save face, save pain, and get further faster? Do you guys get what I'm saying, right? Okay, so just practically, what could this look like? When I'm looking for someone older who you say you found one of the godliest women in the world. Sometimes I look for people that are doing, like when I wanted to be a speaker, I followed a guy that was a speaker. I said, hey, can I just travel with you? I'll carry your books. I'll drive you to things. I will take you wherever. So I saw his work life, and I'm like, how can I join your work life? Because I want to one day do what you do. And he would eventually let me travel with him, and I'd accompany him. They say discipleship is caught, not taught. And so you could listen to a message, you could even listen to a teacher, but there is a difference, though, when you go from a lecture to a lab. And what Jesus did a lot was take them from a message to actually following him, to not only following him, to like participating and doing things with him. I would also say your family life. Some of you guys grew up in Christian homes, but many of you guys grew up in homes that maybe even went to church, but you look at the spiritual life of your parents. Even one big epidemic right now is like our fathers are not always the spiritual leaders in our home. That are like, man, I want to know what it looks like to be a spiritual leader and to create a culture in our home that pursues God, and it just has more intentionality and tradition. And I just want, I think many of you guys would say, what I grew up with was good, but I do want something more for my kids. I would say, you're not going to learn that from your friend Jimmy in the dorms. If people are even not named Jimmy anymore. You're going to learn that from people that are married, that are intentional. How can you join them? Even going to dinner with a family. It's powerful to act in. Discipleship is not caught. It's not taught, it's caught. Real quick, I'll show this. I think if you want to learn from someone, here's some, and I'm going to focus on job actually on this. Maybe you see someone that's doing what you want to do. Because this, again, there is a challenge of graduating college and not finding a job in something close to what you're doing. I couldn't encourage you more to get internships while you're young and you're in college as much as possible. Like, even if that means you have to say no to certain groups or clubs or times of hanging out and being like, I want to go and actually spend time doing what I, for the future, want to do, because I'll never get this window back again. And it only gets harder to pursue my dreams once I'm out of college, married, with kids. So when I find someone who does what I want to do, this is just a flow of learning, is I say, hey, can I do this? Basically, let's say someone asks me, Grant, I want to learn how to speak. This Thursday, I'm going to speak at a conference. A young guy that I'm discipling is coming with me. And this is the flow. I'll say, yo, I do, and then you watch, and then ask questions afterwards. That's stage one. The second stage is I do, you help. So I bring him up for Q&A. I've done that before. But the pressure's not on him. He's going to help, but it's still me that he's counting on. Third stage would be I do, or you do. In 2 months, he's going to preach at a conference that I'm also preaching at. He's doing a breakout while I'm doing the main session. So now it's going to be him speaking, and we'll talk afterwards. But I'm still there to help. I'm going to be interviewing him in this breakout. And then the fourth stage is he does it, and one day I want him to disciple and help somebody else grow and being replicated and mentored. And so, again, these stages is like, how can you find someone who's doing that? Just to close, I know that this may be new, or maybe you're guys like, man, we all do this already. We already discipled. But this is one of the pastors in Seattle. I was speaking at his church, and I saw him with this picture frame in his office, and I was like, man, I knew that he discipled. He's the guy in the maroon shirt in the picture. I knew he discipled the guy on the right, and then I knew that guy is a pastor of one of the largest churches in Dallas because he got mentored at a really young age in college by this guy, who's the guy in the blue shirt, his name's Scott. I asked Scott, I said, who's the guy on the far left? And he said, that's the man who discipled me. I was like, no way. So is the guy on the right, far right, is that who your discipled? And he's like, it is. And basically, they went on a retreat together because they had never met each other. The guy on the far left had never even met Brian, who's second to the right. And I don't know about y'all, but to me, it's like, man, I want to live a life that one day I get to heaven and I meet people that I poured into, who poured into others, who poured into others. But this is what we got to do that is we have to have some type of strategy and some type of plan. And I know often you might go to church and they're like, they're not teaching us how to do this, connecting us to other people to do this. I see it in the Bible with Jesus, but what do I do? And here's kind of a strategy or goal that I would focus on. If you guys can pull that up. Is where, if you could just leave again with another thing, is just assess where are you on this trajectory. I showed you a picture of 4 layers of discipleship, but you guys can keep this up. Are you at a learner where you're still receiving? Are you a leader where you're pouring into someone younger? Even if you're a college kid, discipleship to me is frequently following someone who is spiritually a couple steps ahead. And so it doesn't mean you have to be married with kids to disciple. It doesn't mean you have to have a degree. It doesn't mean if you're spiritually a couple steps ahead, you could always disciple someone. If you're in college, you could disciple someone who's a freshman or in high school. If you're wherever stage, you're always a couple stages ahead. And so leader is someone who disciples someone. I started discipling for the first time when I was 19, and it was a freshman in college. And it wakes you up a lot too, because I'm like, man, if this guy's going to follow me into my world, he's going to see that my car is like dirty, or I play too much Call of Duty. Like, he's going to see that it almost made me feel like, what am I doing with my life if I had someone enter into my world? Next was Disciple Maker and Multiplier. Do y'all know who does this really, really well? People that sell knives do this really well. If you guys have ever seen people that sell Herbalife, maybe some of y'all do. People that sell Mary Kay. Are you guys familiar with these brands where they're just like reaching out to you on Facebook and they're like, hey, do you want to buy this or buy this? They have this clarity because in their groups, it's like, you're a learner, you're a leader, you're a double disciple maker. In those groups, they'll be like, you're ruby, you're diamond if you get to this level, you're double diamond, you keep going, you're infinity stone, and you just keep growing and growing, and it motivates us. And I just think if I can encourage you something is like pursue discipleship, pursue getting mentored, because what happens if we don't is, this is a real stretch, but there's a point, is this is the Metamorphosis of Frogs, if you ever wondered. This is the most educational thing I'm going to teach you guys. I don't know if y'all knew this, but frogs replicate as well. They create eggs, they create embryo, create tadpole. I knew those. What I didn't know is that there's tadpoles with 2 legs, and then there's tadpoles with 4 legs, and then frogs. And here's my point, is sometimes us as Christians, what is we get saved, that's like the egg stage. We join a church, that's like the embryo stage. We start giving and serving and regularly going, maybe even inviting people, that's the tadpole stage. But we never actually disciple anyone. And we never seek to get discipled. And we never replicate. We just get stuck in this tadpole stage. We're like, yes, I am a Christian. Yes, I go to church. Yes, I serve or I give. But I'm like, but have you made disciples? Because Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations. That wasn't just for the elite Christian leaders, that was for every Christian. And I sometimes joke, what if we could just make the commission great again? You know, there's this great commission of go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And many of us do not go and make disciples, and I'm telling you, this is something that might be missing in your faith, where you feel like, well, faith is kind of boring for me. Well, I would say, if you don't do what God's called us to do, yes, it can get boring. And what happens is we get stuck at the tadpole stage, and there was actually a lake where these tadpoles got bigger and bigger and bigger because they just stayed at that tadpole stage. It was a toxic lake. This will be interesting, is this lake was toxic. And what happened with these tadpoles were stuck as tadpoles. But what happened is they kept growing, they kept getting bigger. If you guys can pull this up, this is what these tadpoles look like as they got bigger. Sorry, I know this is a Christian college. Let me fix that. So does anyone see that and think that's cute? Does anyone see this thing and think, man, that's a really cute animal? That's a big tadpole. Did you guys notice how when you guys saw that, you're like, ugh. No one, when girls see puppies, they're like, oh my God, like their tone changes, they're happy. No one saw that and thought, oh my God, that's so cute. Nobody wants to be a big tadpole. You don't want to be that. The world doesn't need you to be that. The church doesn't need you to be that. God has called us to be fishers of men. He's not called us to be these obese tadpoles that just get bigger and stay at this stage. And so I know that for some of you guys, you're like, hey, this is great, but man, I don't feel any type of pressure to pursue this. But for some of you guys, I really would encourage y'all to pray towards God. Who is it that you have put in my life that I could start getting discipled by? How can I ask them to pour into me? How can I find a way to get into their life? And yeah, however I can help, I'm going to stay for a little bit, but I really encourage y'all to pursue this. If there's one person that has a question, I'd love to help however I can. Anybody want to raise their hand? I know, again, that's abnormal, but if anyone has a question, just raise your hand. I'll wait 5 more seconds. Any practical question on discipleship? I'll just finish then with this, if I don't see a question, is the way I pursued the person who discipled me after the guy who he moved. I get discipled by the architect of Walmart recently. He's a big-time business leader, and basically, this guy likes to run. And so I don't like to run. I don't know who likes to run. I don't know why anyone likes to run, especially early in the morning. It's just like all you do is just go, run by yourself. And I don't like to do that, but I knew that he liked to do it. And if you guys remember, I try to look for family life, personal life, church life, work life. I like to find in their personal life, that's one of the most fun and easy ways to join someone older, is see what do they like to do and how do you join it. So I told this architect for Walmart, who was so busy, it was so hard to get a meeting with him, which was mentorship, that I texted him at that night and I said, man, I'm really trying to get into running right now. And I'm not trying to get into running, but I know he wants to run. So I say, hey, can I run with you? And he said, if you're serious, meet me tomorrow at 4. And I'm like, man, why do runners love to wake up early? They posted on Instagram how far they ran before we even woke up. But I said, I got to be there. So I said, I was interested. So I show up at 4 a.m. I can't tell them I already have plans. So I go, and I love to tell y'all, this was the best discipleship story I ever had. But the reality is, I showed up at 4 a.m. and this man never showed up at all. Because he woke up at 7 a.m. when other normal people wake up. And he texted me, when I said, meet me tomorrow at 4, I meant 4 p.m. And I'm just like, well, why would you say, if you're serious, meet me at 4? That makes it seem like it's 4 a.m. But I'll just tell y'all, this guy, I've been now doing life with him for about 3 years. And I was so glad because I knew this guy now knows I'm serious about getting discipled by him. Maybe if it was some other young person, they'd be like, hey, I want to do this. And they might not follow through, or they might say yes, and then they change their mind, or they back out, or they're too busy. But the disciples move their life around Jesus. And if we want to get discipled, we got to move our life around some of the older leaders in our lives. And if you don't do this, you're missing out, because the bar for being a young Christian leader is really low right now. It's actually, you just have to do good to be great. And if you could be great and you could pursue this, you'll be so set apart. I promise anyone who pursues this, 10 years from now, you will not regret it. Thank you, guys.